I think what's interesting about Nutanix is as I was digging in doing some research, because as I said, I'm a
Sure.
little bit of a Nutanix noob. I had not I knew about the brand, I knew they existed, but it's not something I dealt with before last year or so. Their real claim to fame was they moved into the world when, you know, 10 years ago, and even now, you got your Dell servers running VMware hypervisor, but then you got Cisco switches running your SAN, and you got a nimble storage on that SAN. And anytime you had to change something and something broke, the storage guys were pointing at the network guys. The network guys were pointing at the server guys. Server guys were pointing at the VMware hypervisor guys. You have four different, you know, stakeholders, four different vendors, four different sets of hardware, four different management tool. You got your Cisco management stack, your Nimble management stack. And not only did that cause issues with troubleshooting and scaling, but it actually starts to decrease performance because you're not in a holistic, well-designed system. And Nutanix came around and said, we're going to manage everything. One console, we manage storage, networking, and the hypervisor together. It's this hyperconverged, which is a phrase that was very popular for a while, but it's this idea that they manage everything. And it really gives you some performance capabilities that you don't get from the individual things. I've read anywhere from 20 to 80% more efficient on hardware running Nutanix because it controls everything. The other big advantages over VMware is, um, it has its own hypervisor, you said, but it's built on KVM, which is the Linux open source virtualization tool. But nobody wants to manage CentOS or KVM. We don't have a bunch of Linux guys who can patch it, maintain it. So they took that problem and took it on themselves, but you're running open source software at its root, which means it's really stable, really well tested, really trustworthy, used by billions of servers across the world between Google and AWS and all these big players. They use KVM every day, so it's really well tested. And then on the hypervisor side, the logs in the state is in on VMware is held in memory.
Mhm.
So you're requiring on syslog for troubleshooting, like you got to make sure you have logging set up properly on VMware, whereas KVM runs on disk. So if you have any sort of issue, there's a controller server on every host, and that server keeps track of logs to disk, which means you have much better capabilities to troubleshoot and see things like security than you do even on VMware. So lots of interesting advantages to the stack. As I was reading, it looks real like there's some real compelling reasons to look at it as an alternative to when, especially if you're replacing all the components of your stack.
Well, it's interesting. Just yesterday, I was in a meeting with the Nutanix and with a large media corporation, and it's very. We all thought as Nutanix is a play for that hyper-converged architecture. That is absolutely where they've made their bread and butter, and everything else is. And then the hypervisor part of it, because most of us in our daily lives, that's what we're thinking about: is what are we going to do for the
Sure. Yep.
virtualization? But in this particular instance, it had nothing to do with that. I guess I was a bit naive to understand the level of sophistication that Nutanix has developed in the object store space. And so when we're talking about file system and object store at the petabytes level, they ended up having a perfect situation for that. It has nothing to do with the hypervisor because they can add global namespace on the fly in a sense. Whether you've got a couple of petabytes going up from there, usually you're a client that's got at least 100 terabytes of data or more, but in that petabyte scale, that's one of the biggest problems that we've had always is how do we scale that the open file name system to the nth degree and the degree that people need for so I think for
Yep.
me what that did is really added to the fact that I've had not a single client that has Nutanix ever take it out or complain. And once again, I'm not making a sales pitch for Nutanix. I'm just making an
Sure.
observation,
Sure.
right? An observation is, hey, this stuff really is made, it's prime time. It works amazingly, and the people
Yeah.
that have it love it. But above and beyond that, to know that that company is not just supporting our customers with the need for virtualization and need for cloud and all the things we already discussed, but also on that next level up, going to petabytes of scale with object and file is just, to me, it rounds out and solidifies that these guys are going to be around for quite a long time. Nobody has to worry about, well, VMware, if I have that, I know it's not going anywhere. Well, might not be going anywhere, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. but Nutanix is far beyond that threshold of being a new player in the market, and that depth of product line is quite amazing.
Yeah, that ability to scale that object namespace to the cloud
Yes.
is incredible. Where you can add that cloud as to part of that storage. They have native migrations from VMware. It's built in.
Hmm.
Native migrations to Azure. It's built in. So you need to move stuff around. It's natively supported. You're not, a lot of these other tools you have to use a third party to get workloads moved in and out. Nutanix supports it natively. So really scalable, really powerful stuff. And I think a really compelling solution for those scenarios that fit it. But as you said, I love our ability to kind of come at it from multiple directions.